Welcome to Statistics in Excel video number 57. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on my YouTube channel, then click on my college website link, and you can download the workbook Business 210, Chapter 5. If you're in the class, go to our Chapter 5 website. Hey, this is an exciting video because we get to build a discrete probability distribution. Totally straightforward, mostly because we've already learned how to do most of it. And the great thing is, very useful when you're calculating lots of probabilities. 7 steps. Define your random variable first. Build frequency distribution. Oh, we already know how to do that. Calculate relative frequency. Oh, we know how to do that one too. That's all Chapter 2 stuff. Check requirement 1 and 2 for requirements for probability distributions. Each probability greater than or equal to 0, all of them added together 1. Then you want to create a column chart for this discrete variable because it'll help us visualize it. And be sure and remember when you're doing this discrete variable, the columns don't touch because there's gaps between the numbers. And finally, then we use our probability distribution to calculate probabilities and make predictions. Let's scroll over here. I have to zoom down a little bit. Here's our problem at hand. We did a little gathering of data. Over the last 20 days, the number of operating rooms used at TG Hospital were: on 3 days, we used 1. On 5 of the days, we used 2 operating rooms. On 8 of the days, we used 3. On 4 of the days, we used all 4. So we want to create a probability distribution discrete. In our case, that can be used to make predictions in the future. The first trick, number 1, define the variable. Well, what in the world are we counting here? Over the past 20 days, the number of number of operating rooms. So down here, discrete random variable x. It is number of operating rooms used in 1 day, right? Because 5 days had 5 of the total 20 days, 2 operating rooms were used. 3 operating rooms were used. That's the random variable x. 3 of them were used on 8 days, right? So number of operating rooms used in 1 day. And so when you're doing your homework, and one of the first thing you have to do, and sometimes you have to think a little bit about what it is, but usually it's quite straightforward. You just say what is it that I am counting? It's not days here. It's number of operating rooms. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, we have to create a frequency distribution. Now, x, number of operating rooms used for 1 day. Well, what are all the possibilities we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So over this 20-day sample here, that's all we had. So for x, and I put, usually x is on this side, especially when you're making charts, and then we did frequency. The reason why I put the x here, and then we're going to count the frequencies over here, is because I wanted our x values right next to the probabilities. That way it'll be easy to make our chart. Well, first we have to put 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? There are our random variables. That's the range for our random variables. There's gaps between them. We know this is discrete. Now, frequency, we just have to look up here. Now, think about this. We're given this written description, so they actually already created the frequency distribution for us. They went ahead and counted, right? They had their little tally sheet, and 3 operating rooms were used. They had 8 listings of the number 3. So they really already created the frequency distribution for us. So for 1, we're going to put 3 days. We counted how many days had 1 operating used? 3. For the random variable x equals 2, we counted 5 days out of the 20 days. 3, we counted 8. There were 8 total days that we had 3 operating rooms used. And finally, 4, there was 4. All right. So frequency distribution. Let's see if I can make this A little bit bigger here. Now we need to calculate what? Relative frequency. You mean it's really that straightforward? Yeah. We have to add up how many we have total days here before we can go ahead and calculate our relative frequency. I click right there, and the keyboard shortcut for AutoSum is Alt equals. And then we can highlight the whole range, and in the active cell at the top equals one cell to my left divided by this, and I'm going to hit the F4 key. Now to populate all of these cells with that formula, Control Enter. OK, now, so we've done 1, 2, 3. We defined the variable. We built our little frequency table. We did it differently. By the way, we would use, if we had all the raw data, what would we do here? We just use the count if. Back over here, we saw an example in last chapter. We did that. But we'd use a count if and count how many ones we had, how many twos, threes, etc. We did our frequency distribution, our relative frequency. Now we have to check if it's valid. First rule is each one of these probabilities greater than or equal to 0. I'm going to highlight all the cells, and I'm going to do a logical formula. Equals is this one right here greater than or equal to. Remember, in Excel, there's not a single symbol for greater than or equal to, so we have to type 2 symbols. 0 to populate all the cells with our formula. I hold Control and Enter. What if I were to put -1 here? Ding, 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 ding. That's a false. Control Z is undo. Undo is also somewhere. Oh, I took it off because I always use the keyboard shortcut. Now, that's rule number 1. Requirement number 1. Requirement number 2, what is it? Alt equals, and I'm going to have my fingers crossed when I hit Enter. Oh, look at that. It doesn't equal. Oh, look at that. I made a terrible mistake there. Ah, that's lucky we have our rule to check here. Boom, that does not equal 1. All right, I'm going to highlight all the cells and watch this. In the active cell, I'm going to hit F2. And now, can I edit this? Watch this. I'm going to show you 2 ways to edit this. I'm going to double-click this cell reference, just like double-clicking a word in Word highlights a word. Double-clicking a cell reference highlights it, and then you can simply replace it. And then I'm going to Control Enter to repopulate all those cells. Notice I didn't have to hit Delete first. Control Enter, and there I get it. Now I'm going to Control Z and show you one other way. Control Z is undo. Hit F2. Here's another way. Sometimes if you want to use your move cursor, you can point to the solid blue box around the cell reference and click and drag. That's another way to edit this, and then Control Enter. By the way, what I did before was totally wrong. I'm sure while you guys were watching it, you were going, man, he does not know how to do this. I just wasn't paying attention. You can't take the random variable and divide by the count. Oh. OK, Control Y is redo. Control Y is undo the undo. All right, so both conditions are met. We have our probabilities. Notice I put over here P of x and F of x. In this textbook, they use F of x. In other textbooks, they use P of x. Now, we want to create a chart. The chart will help us visualize, especially when we start doing binomial distributions, and even the later continuous distributions. I'll show you some good tricks with charts. But here we just want to do a basic column chart. I'm going to highlight my x's and my P of x's, my y's, and the way. So there it is, x and y. Now I'm going to create a column chart, and it's going to come out wrong. And the reason why is Excel is expecting a category here when we do a column chart. The fact that there's numbers there confuses it. But there's an easy way to fix it. Now, I could go up to Insert and then Column and then that one. But in 2007, there's a keyboard shortcut for your default chart, Alt F1. Alt F1. Now, there's the mistake. It automatically assumes there's 2 data sets. We don't really want it. We want the our x to be here. So I'm going to click here and hit Delete. Then I'm going to click, and it got rid of it. Then I'm going to click here. I don't need the legend. Now, this chart looks correct, but there's a mistake because these numbers were put in by default. And later, when we have a 0 here, the default will not work. So I want to show you how to edit this chart and force the chart to take some data inputs for the horizontal axis. You go Chart Tools is a context sensitive ribbon, and under it is Design, Layout, and Format. Now I have my screen really small here, so the ribbon looks really small. But you click on Design, and then in the Data group, we're going to be doing this a lot in this for the rest of this class. We are going to be we have the power to tell the chart what data to get from the cells. So I'm going to click on Select Data. Now, here's the data set. If I click Edit, I can see, sure enough, it got it right. That actually is under the chart. Let's click Cancel, because we'll never be able to, and cancel, we'll never be able to actually get to our data unless it's out of the way. All right, so there. Now with the chart highlighted, I go back up Design, Select Data. We looked at Edit, and that was correct. If I were to collapse this, you can see that was correct. That's another great trick, because sometimes it doesn't grab all the right data. So editing is just awesome, because you can change it to whatever you want. By the way, you can build your charts from scratch too by adding. And for some more complex charts, you want to do that. Now, Edit, this is what we want to do. Notice by default, I got 1, 2, 3. I'm going to click Edit. And then I'm going to highlight this. Now, why are we doing it when I had 1, 2, 3? Because later 1, 2, 3 won't always be there. It'll be 0 in particular. All right, now it's linked. That's linked. Now I'm going to click OK. Just to prove it to you right off the bat, if I were to put a 0 here, you watch how the chart updates. So that's what's so beautiful about that. Control Z. Now we need to finish making this chart. We would like a label up at the top. I'm actually going to link this label. If I click right here, as soon as you click it, you can either take your cursor and click up here or hit the F2 key. As soon as your cursor's flashed, and you can type equals and then scroll anywhere and link. I'm just going to link A1 and then hit Enter. OK. Over the last 20 days, the number of operating rooms used at TGs were. All right, now I'm going to click on this, and I want to change the font size. I'm going to go up to Home, click there, and hit 12. There's lots of ways to change the font size there. Now let's look at this if I can. Now we need a label right here, and because it's not obvious at all what this 1, 2, 3 means. Remember, that's the random variable, the number of operating rooms used in one day. So we already have that label because we defined our x and wrote it out in a cell. So I'm actually going to scoot this down so I can get to that cell or that cell right there. I'm going to go up to Layout, Axis Titles. I want horizontal and display below. Same thing. As soon as it's highlighted, you hit F2. And then you can scroll. Oh, and equals. And then scroll up. And I'm going to click right on that cell. Number of operating rooms used in one day. Now, let's look at that right there. You see how it's there? I'm going to put x equals. And then Enter. Notice I changed the content of the cell, and what happened? Really, that linking your axis here and your labels like that to cells is really why Excel exists. That way you put the information in one place and one place only. If you change it, it changes everywhere else. Now we need to do a few other things here. I probably want to indicate that this is probability. So I'm going to go back up to Layout, and instead of horizontal, I want to do vertical. And this time I'm just going to type it. As soon as it's highlighted like this, I can just type probability. Notice it's typing up there, and then Enter. So it says probability. So I've linked this, this, and this. A few more things. Very important. These columns cannot touch. This is not a histogram. Remember the histogram, we went 10 up to 20, and then 20 up to 30. There was no space because we wanted to visually articulate that there was no space between 10 to 20, 20 up to 30. But here, we want to visually indicate that there are gaps, so we want to leave gaps. You know what else? We can do lots of things, and we could leave this here, which would tell us the probabilities. We could also put the probabilities above the columns and then get rid of that so we don't have too much chart junk. I think I'm going to do that this time. Sometimes you want it here. Sometimes if there's lots of them and you don't want to clutter up the chart, but we don't have too many here, so it might be nice to click on the column, go up to Layout. Data labels is the trick, and then I'm going to say outside end. If you want all the options, you can list all sorts of things. You go there, but that's all we need for right now. Very good. So now watch this. Information listed once and twice, that's called chart junk. So I'm going to click on the axis, and what's the keyboard shortcut for delete? Delete. Not only that, but are these lines really necessary? I'm going to click on the lines, and then what's the keyboard shortcut for delete? Delete. Now, so we have our labels here, our chart titles. Maybe one last thing I'd like to do. I'd like to have a little variance in the color. They're all the same. It's fine if they are. And later we'll actually see a situation where you want them all the same. But right now, I'm just going to show you how to change the colors. What's the keyboard shortcut for format cells? Well, it's the same for format chart element. Control 1. You could also right click and point to format data series. I'm going to go to fill, solid. Oh, no, I don't want fill and just this one right here. Vary colors by point. So that's nice. Later, when we're going to talk about two distinct parts, like we want to talk about these two as being a group and these two as a group, we'll see a different trick for doing this. But since we just want to see, we're not going to group them in any way, then it's fine to have different colors for each. In fact, it's kind of helpful. So there it is. That's a great chart that helps us visually articulate this distribution. Remember, a distribution of all of the probabilities. So we've done it in a table format, and we've done it in a chart format. Now, the last reason we do the whole distribution, as we mentioned before, because then it's easy to make predictions. In essence, add up or do whatever probability calculations we're doing. Now, I have 2's listed here. I want to look at less than or equal to 2, probability of x less than or equal to 2, probability of x less than 2, probability of x greater than or equal to, and finally, probability of x greater than 2. Let's click right here. Less than or equal to 2. So we go right up here. Here's our x. Here's our probabilities. We're going to look here. Oh, less than or equal to. So 2 is included. So there's the two x's. And then over here are the corresponding probabilities. So we want to add those up. Alt equals is the keyboard shortcut for AutoSum. And then I highlight those two and enter. Now, what about probability of x less than 2? Well, here's 2. Less than 2. Oh, 2 is not included, so it's just this one. Here's the x, and then we jump over to the corresponding probability. So I'm going to say Alt equals, and click on that one. Now, greater than or equal to 2. So we need to look through the x's, greater than or equal to 2, and then find the associated probabilities. So greater than or equal to. Well, there's 2, and it's included, so that and greater than. Notice these are all the x's that we need, and then here's the corresponding probabilities over in this column. So Alt equals, and then highlight those 3, enter. Now, what about probability of x greater than 2? Greater than 2. Well, there's 2. Oh, but greater than. 2 is not included, so I want these two x's. Notice we have our x's and our probabilities here. We say these are both greater than 2. True, true. So I want these two probabilities that match those two things. True, true. So those are the ones I want to add. Now, why did I phrase it that way this last time? I said our criteria for x greater than 2, our criteria is find all of the x's that are greater than 2. Is that greater than true? 2? Yes, it is. The answer is true. Is this greater than 2? Yes, the answer is true. Then I went over here and got this one and this one. Why? Because both of the criteria was greater than 2. two trues here, so these two probabilities get added. Now, how did we do it? We did it by hand by highlighting it. But you know, when you're doing lots of probabilities like this all the time, there can be a problem when you accidentally highlight the wrong ranges. Not only that, but you're doing formulas over and over again. So I want to show you an alternative that just cuts to the chase. One formula that will work for all four of these. Now, this formula is not required for this class. You're free to just do this the regular summing after you build your distribution. But if you know how to use the SUMIF function, then you can do one formula that will replace all of these. Now, what does SUMIF mean? Well, we've used COUNTIF, right? Count if the criteria is met. Well, SUMIF is just the same. We're going to say things like, please look at all of the x's, that's the criteria, and give me the ones greater than 2. Of all these x's, which ones are greater than 2? Those. Well, we can't add those because the SUMIF is using these as criteria. But then the SUMIF, you can say, oh, if these two are true, go over into the corresponding range, find the probabilities, and add them. Now, the trick to this is that you put greater than, you actually type these into a cell like this. There's other ways to do this SUMIF, but this is one way that is very convenient. Now, SUMIF, I actually have some hints here for the SUMIF function. And I'm going to put a link right here for a video I have at YouTube that goes over like 20 different examples of SUMIF. So if you think you like the SUMIF, or you're in your job later and you're like, man, I can't remember how to do the SUMIF, you got to go watch that video. All right, here we go. You ready? Equals SUMIF. And there are 1, 2, 3 criteria. The range is the range of cells with the criteria. The criteria will be whatever comparative operator and number we want. And the sum range will be this. So I'm going to highlight these. And actually, when you're doing SUMIF, anytime you highlight this first range determines how many things could be added in the second range. But there it is, the range, and then comma. Notice what happens to the screen tip when I type comma. Comma, see it went to bold. That means, hey, please give me the criteria now. Got to be either a single 2, which will find just a 2, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, less than, greater than or equal to, greater than. There's also a not symbol, which we'll see later. All right, so that's the criteria, comma, and then the sum range. There it is. Now, technically, all you have to do is click in the first cell for SUMIF, because this first range defines how many cells can be added in the second range. But most people just go like that. Now, look, same size, makes sense. What it's going to do is go true, false over here. And anything that's true here, it grabs it from here and adds it. Watch this. Ready? We don't even have to put a closed parentheses, but I will. Enter. Did it get it right? Yeah, not only that, but watch this. Watch this. Greater than 2. As soon as I change the criteria, watch this function. Oh, and that's exactly what we got here. Now I'm going to change it again. Greater than or equal to 2? You got to be kidding me. This is supposed to come out to be 85, right, when I hit enter? Whoa, that is like magic. I'm going to Control Z. I want to do this one more time. Practice makes perfect. Equals SUMIF. Now, when you're using a function for the first time, sometimes it's helpful to go up to the functions argument dialog box. Because if you can't remember what each one of these are, there's a hint. So I'm going to click here. And here's the hint. The range. Range is the range of cells you want evaluated. That means evaluating means, is it a true or false? That means got the criteria. So I'm going to highlight this one right here. Now, criteria is the condition or criteria in the form of a number like 2, expression like greater than or equal to 2, or text. Because you can use SUMIF to count like the sales for apples if you want. So I'm going to click right there, right? Because there's the associated one. And finally, Notice it's very polite. It shows you in quotes here what it sees as criteria. By the way, if you were going to type it in here, if you're going to type in greater than 2, which I never suggest because the beauty of Excel is that you put it in a cell and then you can change it and the thing changes. But if you were to type it in a cell, you'd have to actually put it in quotes. Sum range are the actual cells to sum. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight these. Notice it's already given our answer. It gives you a beautiful preview here. You see, when I highlight that range, it tells me all of the x's. Highlight the criteria, it gives me the criteria. Highlight the probabilities, boom, it gives us the probability. There's the answer. There's another formula result. Click OK. Now, if you haven't noticed already, since we already have the criteria for each one of these formulas, that's B19 is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells to my left. So all of these sum ifs can just look 5 cells to my left. I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to highlight all of the cells. And in the active cell at the top, I'm going to say equals sum if. The range is going to be this right here. Hit your F4 key, because as we copy down, each one of these criteria needs the same x's. Comma, the criteria, it's a relative cell reference, 5 to my left. So as we copy it down, it'll know to move down. Comma, and then the sum range, that's this right here. Hit F4, because again, each one of these criteria need to be looking at the same probabilities. F4. Close parentheses. Now, I've already highlighted all the cells. So to populate all the cells, I hold Control and Enter. That's magic. I love it. We can change it to anything. How about, watch this, greater than 3. Did that work? Oops. Yeah, sure it did, because greater than 3 is the 4. I'm going to Control Z. All right. So building a probability distribution, there's your 7 steps. Building your chart, there it is right there. Don't forget, limit the chart junk. For discrete, the columns can't touch. And finally, we know how to do from chapter 2, frequency, relative frequency. You got to check the 2 requirements. And finally, have fun with making predictions, especially if you want to try that new sum if. All right, we'll see you next video.